Awesome. Well, hey, it's super nice to meet you, by the way.
Yeah, remind me your name again. What's your
Yeah,
name?
no problem. I'm Chad. I probably should have brought that
Chad.
up or something.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't think I've ever told you my name, so
Nice to meet you, Chad.
no, it's awesome. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because I only found Funhouse like 2 months ago.
Oh, really? Okay.
So yeah, so it's funny because for me, as far as I'm concerned, like you're like an OG, Funhouse guy.
I know. I'm
Um,
the newest guy there. Yeah.
yeah, well, and that's what's so funny about. Yeah, exactly. Like to me, it's like you are just as synonymous as like you and Alana, for instance, are just as synonymous to me as like Bruce and Lawrence and
Oh,
anyone
cool.
else.
Well, that's good
So
to hear.
yeah, it's funny because I'm just like going around watching your guys' backlog and then like, oh, here's a Ryan video. Here's a I just saw your first video, I think was that GTA video, is that right?
Yeah, it was a GTA. It was the one where I had my inner monologue going.
Yes, that was
Yeah.
I just showed all my friends that too. I was like, this dude's fucking hilarious, man. Um,
I don't think.
so speaking of that, for people I'm showing, so all right. So I know you guys are in state, Ryan, and I know that you from Tennessee. I know you have
Yeah.
a background in used to do what do you even call those? I guess like costume. Oh, I was gonna say costume party, but that sounds like what do you call it, Phantom of the Opera? But you used to do like rent a superhero kind of stuff, right?
I was a birthday. I was basically a birthday party entertainer for
Dope.
many years when I first moved out here. That was kind of my. That's how I made my money. That's how I made my rent money, my
Oh,
beer
I
money.
didn't catch. I missed the part where that was you doing that out in LA. Okay, so that was so rather than a waiter, that's what you were doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool,
Basically,
cool.
when you move out here, most everyone that's working on sets are trying to, it's always a freelance kind of. You're just working on your next gig, and you don't know what your next gig is going to be after that. So basically, someone always has you usually have a supplemental job, a waiter, like you said, or something. So mine was a birthday clown on the weekends, and it was
Well, that
great.
that's how I feel right now. I'm a Lyft driver,
Okay, there you go. So that's
and I
your
feel like
version
that's
of being
kind
a
of the new
birthday
one,
clown.
right?
Yeah.
It is. It totally is. That's it. Yeah, and I an emphasis on the clown part. And so what happens is, yeah, that it's cool because people ask me a lot about, like, oh, is this your full-time job? And it's like, well, this is the thing I do so that I can eat while I'm trying to make this YouTube situation, get figured out. And
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
cool because it's kind of like we're almost in a position now because of gig economy stuff that we're past the whole starving artist thing of like, well, I need time to paint, and so I can't paint and work a full-time job, so I'll just be starving to death. It's like, well, if you can do gig work, you know
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, there's so many opportunities now for gig economy stuff, with all the apps and whatever. But I mean, this was before that. This was before Uber and stuff. This was
oh
2010 or
yeah.
whatever. Basically just found this on Craigslist, and it was great. The reason I loved the birthday party gig is because it's like just your weekends. It's like 4 or 5 hours during the day on the weekends. So not much is going on usually then anyway.
Yeah, sure.
And then yeah, you're basically being an idiot for an hour, and your bosses are literally 10 years old. If they're happy, then the parents are happy. And then you get mad tips, and then a lot of times they'll be like, "Hey, Batman, let's hang out after the party and take shots with me and the
Yeah, right.
dads." And I'm like, "All right, that's a good
Right.
perk too." So I liked everything about it.
It's so funny because when you're talking about that with the Funhouse guys, they're asking about like horny moms,
Well,
and
yeah,
I
that
used to be
happened too.
so I'm from California. I used to live in a Sacramento area,
Okay, yeah.
and I was a pool boy. And the same thing. People are always like, "Oh yeah, how are those MILFs or
Well,
whatever?" It's
that's
like,
even
dude,
worse, I bet. Yeah, that's even more stereotypical, like
it is because all the
fuck
movies.
the pool boy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like it couldn't be more far from the truth. The thing that's funny about those too is the fact that it's like you don't have time. Like you're on a schedule.
All right,
It's
that's
like
true.
they don't talk about that you normally have like 40 pools to clean in a day. So like you spend most of your time driving and then you're over there like hurry, hurry, hurry.
Right, right,
So it's super funny the idea that I'd be like, hey, why did you spend an hour and a half over at so and so's house?
right.
It's like, yeah, if I owned my own company or something, sure.
Right.
Same thing with Pizza Boys. Well, it was funny. The In Bruges poster really stuck out to me because I just did a video on In Bruges and how it's like my
Oh, hell
favorite
yeah.
movie.
I love Martin McDonough, man. Yeah, he's awesome.
In the first place, you're right. Martin McDonagh's dope, but also just like that movie is a masterclass on plants, or setups and plants, or plants and payoffs.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, misdirection, all
Like,
sorts of stuff.
yeah, most of the video was the talking about how almost everything that happens in the third act that seemed kind of like they're all set up from things in the first two acts that felt like throwaway jokes. It's like homie tries to
Mhm.
pay entry to go to the top of the tower and the guy won't take his change, even though he's only 10p short. So at the end, that explains why he had all that change left over so that he could drop it to try to warn, Ray.
Yeah.
Stuff like that is just like, it's a great example of people caring enough to actually, there's things you can get away with. And it's always cool to see people who, Michelle Haneke is another great example, where it's like he did things that he didn't have to do. We wouldn't have been like, man, where did that change come from? And like, okay, he has change in his pocket, no big deal.
Right.
But it's like he did take the time to explain that, which is just cool.
Totally, yeah, and it seems frivolous at the time, but then you remember it as it's happening. You're like, oh, you make the connection. You know, another movie that kind of reminds me of what you just said is that came out recently was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where it's like almost 2.5 hour movie, and then basically that last 10-minute act, or that last 10-minute scene where he's annihilating those people.
Yeah,
it's like every beat of that scene is a payoff to something that happened that was set up hours earlier in this movie.
That is a good point. That is true. You're right. The fact that he was even high in the first place, that was a long time ago.
The flamethrower,
the dog,
out. Yeah, the
dog, flamethrower, yeah.
Like all.
That's a great. Well, and even the routine that homie hangs out in the pool, rehearsing. So that explains why he's out there in the pool. You're right. That is a great point. That is good. Yeah. Another one that people brought up in the comments that I felt like an asshole for not, because I brought up a couple other movies, like No Country for Old Men's good at that too. I forgot to bring up Hot Fuzz. It's like almost as good as not good, but almost as every single thing that happens matters. Like nothing is wasted. Right. If you were to cut almost anything out of the first two acts, something in the third act would not have a setup. Right. And so yeah, it's always. So what you said earlier, how like it kind of gets you involved as well. Like I totally agree. And what was cool is Keegan-Michael Peel was talking. Keegan-Michael Key. I always get there. Peel got 9 names between them. But Keegan was talking about it in an interview with the Aaron sketch, and he was saying how you hear that first name that he throws out or whatever. I think it's the Jake Quellen one or whatever. And he's like, you're expecting like some ghetto black girl. And then when it turns the camera over and you see this white girl being like, you mean Jacqueline? He's like, what it does is you realize what the game is. And so now when it cuts back to me and I keep saying the next name, like Aaron, you're playing the game trying to decode the name. So you feel like a genius if you figure out Aaron before the other guy says Aaron. And I think that's so clever because when those movies, like you said, when you go, oh, that's from the blah, 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 it makes you feel like a badass while you're watching the movie, which I think then makes you think the movie's better.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's how you make a good movie, is make people think they're smart, man.
Absolutely. Well, it's like it's sales too, right? It's like make them think like, yeah, that's a great idea you had of buying all of this, whatever, and selling.
It's just Inception 101.
All right, cool. So let's get into it. I wanted to chat with you a little bit about the future of entertainment, which I think is.
All right, let's do it.
I think it's relevant to what we're going through right now, because I think that we're in a moment that's going to be kind of like, not to ultimate downer, but for us, kind of like 9/11, where there is America before 9/11 and then after 9/11, right?
Absolutely, dude.
So this will, I feel like, be another thing where it's going to be like, this is going to be the before and after, the event, and it is changing things. Even, well, you guys brought this up on just podcast before as well, the concept of like what companies are going to have been forced to have people work from home and then realize, oh, hey, we just actually prefer that.
Yeah. No,
so
totally.
I think with movies, we'll see something like that too, where, we've already seen a little bit of people starting to release things on VOD. What would it take? Maybe it's a longevity thing before big movies start being like, you know what, dude, screw it, man.
You mean, are you talking about, you're not talking about working from home for movies. You're talking about just releasing movies.
No, sorry. Releasing movies on VOD. Right.
Yeah. No, I have that same exact thought go through my head when all this was going down. I'm like, to me, in my head, this was like the coffin nail, the last one in terms of the theatrical experience for not giant, $200 million movies. Obviously those movies are always going to be in the theaters, and that's kind of what the theaters are for at this point. But like in terms of your movie like The Hunt or whatever, your mid-range comedy or drama or whatever, movies for adults that aren't $100 million, those are just not going to be in theaters anymore. In my opinion, I mean, maybe a little bit here and there, but I think that this especially is just kind of going to show that people want to watch stuff from home, unfortunately. I think that human beings are just hardwired to not want to do anything. And they were like, well, shit, if I can, I can get the same experience right here in my living room. I got beer and nachos. Like, why the fuck do I want to go spend $30? Like, I think that that's the arithmetic basically, unless you give them something that they need. You know, this isn't mind-blowing stuff, but yeah, it's like you got to give them an Avatar or something that they can't get at home. But
Tenet.
oh yeah, exactly.
That coming out. That's definitely, I want to see that in theater if I get the chance.
I mean, I'm such a I want to see this in theaters guy. You know what I mean? Even for small movies like horror movies and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
But like. And I used to know a lot more people that were that kind of into that too. But even my friends that are really into that, I can tell that they see less movies at the theater. So it's like, it's a bad sign.
I do.
The film fans are like seeing less movies. I feel like your just average person doesn't really give a fuck, honestly.
I completely agree. I think, well, the big one is kids movies, because if you're a dad and you got like 3 kids and your wife that you all got to take to go and then buy popcorn and blah, 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 it's like $100 to take them to go see the stupid Trolls movie. Right. So it's like, if I can spend 40 and we just stay at home and my kids can fall asleep halfway through and we just pause it and then turn it back on tomorrow, you know, and they can watch it multiple times in 48 hours or something like that. Like, yeah, that's way better bang for your buck.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah. But I mean, I think kids movies though are one of the exceptions, because those are one of the always big box office hits, you know, is the children's movies, just because that's just like a day out for the family, you know. They don't know what
that's
they're
true.
doing. And it's like that, you know, it's kind of like dates, family days out. These are like events to go see movies too, you know what I mean? And then you're Jurassic Park, so it's like, or horror movies, just because around Halloween where everyone wants to go get scared together, you know.
Well, dude, I went to go see what's it called, Fantasy Island, and it came out on Valentine's Day, and it was like me and a bunch of couples. It was like, that was it. It was like, it was a mostly empty theater, but it was a whole bunch of couples, and so that absolutely goes along with what you're saying about the whole date night thing, even with these crappy horror movies. It's so that it makes me wonder though. So what is the future? In essence of, I feel like the movie theater experience, I think we've already seen this to an extent. My regular run-of-the-mill theater looks more and more like an Alamo Drafthouse every year.
Yeah, it should. So, I mean, I was in Austin. I went to school in Austin, right? And so I was kind of there for like not the very beginning of the Alamo, but like the Alamo had kind of become a cult thing, you know, but it was nowhere outside of Texas at that point.
Right.
And so that was like my fucking church, dude. I'd go there all the time, and I'm just sitting there like eating, having beer. I'm like, why isn't every movie theater in America like this? Like this is where the opportunity is, because, you know, everyone wants to go. Going out to eat is never going to go out of style, you know? And so if you just look at the movies as, oh, I'm going out to eat and I happen to be seeing a movie, that's your real business opportunity there. And I feel like the Alamo is the only real people truly taking advantage of that as a brand, you know? And then some people are kind of evolving. But yeah, that's definitely where it's
at. Well, and again, even like the, you know, run-of-the-mill theaters, I haven't been to one yet, or not yet, but I haven't been to one in a long time that didn't have like recliners, didn't have beer now. Like a lot of them like serve alcohol and stuff like that. You know, it's becoming, I think, like hellaciously expensive alcohol, but still, you know.
But not many people will come and order it at your seat. You know, that's the cool part about the Alamo, is that you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to go to a bar down the hall. You know?
Yeah, 100%. No, Alamo's definitely better. So it's just that it's interesting watching how, as much as no one has completely jumped full board into the Alamo situation, the fact that they're all trying to bridge that gap now is getting interesting, because I think you're right. There's going to be a drop off of a lot of these run-of-the-mill hunts having huge theater turnouts. And so people are like, I'll just wait till it comes out on VOD and I'll just watch it, you know, a month later or something like that. And then you end up with the theater having to be like, all right, I need a reason for you to get off your ass and show up here, you know.
Totally.
Especially, God forbid, that, you know, Marvel or someone decided, hey, you know what, man, the next freaking, you know, Black Widow is just going to come out on VOD for $50. Like, the theaters will cry, you know?
That ain't. I can't see that happening anytime soon. And at that point, what's the point of making a Black Widow? Like, with all that, what's the point of spending so much money on it, you know?
That's a great question.
I don't know. Well, I don't know. Maybe.
But remember, it was interesting because we kind of saw this. I feel like the first time I saw something like this was with The Interview back in, like, 2014 or something like that, because it was like, oh no, terrorists are going to blow up the theaters if we play this movie, so they just released it on VOD. And I do remember having this moment of like, oh crap, like, okay, like we could just do this, right? Well, and it happened too with like there was some controversy around Guns Akimbo, and so I just saw that on YouTube, you know, for like, I don't know, not very much money, like $10 or something. And I remember like, because for me, like, I'm watching these movies I don't even want to see just so I can do reviews. So it was amazing because I was like, great, I can watch it at like 1.5 times speed and I can pause it and write notes. But that's a niche thing, but it was definitely nice for me. But it is interesting. I mean, I am going to be very interested to see if all theaters basically start to turn into an Alamo and they want to make it like, hey, bring your family. It's going to be a big thing. Well, and you guys even brought up too, like, what do you call them? Drive-ins. Like, wouldn't that be fascinating if drive-ins made a comeback?
That'd be awesome. I don't know. I don't know if I see it. But honestly, to me, the food, but also the IMAX, dude. I mean, IMAX is really the one thing you can't replicate for real, you know. So I think that IMAX should be a bigger deal, and there should be more IMAX theaters playing not just the big stuff, you know. I mean, I'll see anything on an IMAX. It makes it better.
So ultimately, just point being is that it'll be interesting to see if the theaters just keep getting more and more dope because they turn into a place to watch big budget movies, and everything else that's kind of smaller you just watch at home.
Well, I don't know if that's the dopest ending to this whole thing, because I would like to see, you know, everyone see all sorts of movies at the theaters. But yeah, like I think that it is going to become more and more of a theme parky kind of thing where it's like you go see the craziest shit, and hopefully it'll be IMAX. Hopefully we've got Alamo stuff. Hopefully, I don't think 3D is ever going to really take off like James Cameron wants it, and I think he knows that. But I do think that like AR stuff, like augmented reality shit
at the theater,
I could see it. Yeah, I could see them doing something cool where it's like there's holograms around you, you're hanging out, you know, there's more to it. I could see there being a social media aspect to movies, right? Where say, like, you know how no one wants you to be on your phone in the movies, right? Well, say there's something where like it's like a do your own adventure kind of thing at the movies, where everyone on your phone is like making decisions or doing something that affects the film, and there's like a satellite link associated with the movie. I don't know. I'm just thinking of trying to think of any kind of evolution of this stuff that I think would entice people to come. And I think I can see people want to be on their phones at the movies, unfortunately.
Yeah, they do. Well, no, imagine, what's it called? Jabberwock, or what was the Netflix Choose Your Own Adventure they did?
Oh, right. The Black Mirror shit. Yeah.
That's a great example, because then you could you do it on a voting system. Yeah, so everyone in the theater basically punches in their votes, and they would have like a pin key or something that you'd get when you go to see the movie on like your ticket maybe, and then you guys all punch in your pin so that it's only checking your guys' votes, and then you're over there voting.
Right.
Here's what you should do next, and it could even show you like on your phone like, okay, 60% of the theater wanted to do this, and like 30% wanted to do that or something. I could see that. That would be very interesting. I think AR, to me, the really interesting stuff is like gaming. I play a lot of like Warhammer and stuff like that, for instance.
Oh, so shit. Sweet.
Really expensive like board games and stuff. And
have you ever played HeroScape by any chance?
No, but I'm familiar with it.
Me and my roommate got really into HeroScape for a while, and we played all the time. He's really into Warhammer. I can't do Warhammer as much as he can.
Dude, it's just like Warhammer is like a lifestyle is the problem.
Oh yeah.
It is hellaciously monetarily expensive. It's even worse on time expensive. And
that's part for me. It's like I'm sitting there doing like, it's like, okay, I wanna kill that guy. Okay, well, we're gonna roll 15 times. That rolls to see if you can see him. That rolls to see if you hit him. That rolls to see how much damage it was. That rolls to see if he died.
Like, you're not lying, bro.
What are you talking about here?
Interesting, but it's already so expensive anyway. You know, it's like the future of those kinds of people. Some people, I think, thought for a while that like 3D TVs at home would be like everything's gonna be 3D.
Talk to Don Casanova.
No joke. Yeah.
He's the ambassador for 3D TVs at home.
Okay, so I saw that on you guys' quarantine video. How much of that is a joke, and how much of that?
Dude, that is not a joke. Don Casanova was being legit. He loves 3D Blu-rays. You know, if it was up to him, he would watch his worn 3D Blu-ray of Jurassic World every single night, just hang out with his kid.
I don't know if I've ever heard the word lenticular used in a sentence.
Yeah, dude.
No, that was pretty legit.
Yeah, I had to look that up for sure.
So great. No, that is dope. So, okay, well, let's see. Well, the other big one as far as the theaters go is, like I was saying, I think in part what we may start seeing. Well, and that wasn't even really my idea. Mike Sokloska from Red Letter Media was the one who was saying, like, maybe a year ago, that he thought that the future of theaters would turn into like, it's getting so expensive even to just go to the theater that the only movies that would be worth going to the theater to see will be those ones you had to see in theater, which has been an idea for me. I've always thought it'd be so dope to open up a movie theater that just played movies that are better in theater. So it'd be like The Matrix, and we're going to play Gladiator, and we're going to play, this, that, and the other thing.
Right.
I was only 9 when The Matrix came out, so I don't think I ever saw it in theater. So that kind of stuff would be really dope.
George Lucas has been saying kind of pretty much similar predictions of that nature for a while too. Steven Spielberg too. I think, yeah, it was a couple years ago that they were talking about how, exactly what you just said, basically. And then literally that summer, there was like 5 giant box office bombs that everyone was like, are movies over? Like there was The Lone Ranger, that was like a $200 million movie that made nothing, and all stuff like that. So
that's funny because I brought that up. I was saying that about part of why we don't see. This is actually a point. I made a whole video basically because of something that James said during one of your guys' film houses.
Cool.
When Elise was talking about, it was only like my 3rd video too, and Elise was talking about shows that turned into, or movies that turned into shows. Mm-hmm. And James brought up a fantastic point about how he's like, we used to get 2 separate properties, and then everything turned into this hyper homogenous kind of PG-13 world, where instead of a R-rated RoboCop and then like a G-rated RoboCop TV show for kids, we just get one crappy PG-13. And Lone Ranger and stuff makes me think of that.
Okay, yeah, I can kind of see that. Where it's more for the masses as opposed to a niche kind of.
Well, yeah. And the idea, like, so again with the why we even have so many of these kind of like homogenous, boring PG-13 movies is because I think movies like The 13th Warrior or whatever, you'd have like this R-rated movie and it would be worth, it'd cost $200 million. Well, that one was like $100 million or something. And then it would flop in box office. And it's like, okay, we cannot have that happen. Like that will make these companies go under. So how do we get your grandma to watch it and your kids to come watch it? It'll make this very safe, homogenous, like shave off the edges, kind of like you walk out of the theater being like, yeah, that was a movie. And I think if the death of movies ever comes like in a theater in a big way, I think that's going to be a bigger problem than bad movies. It'll be I've gone the last 10 movies I went and saw, I walked out and said, yeah, I think that would be.
Yeah, you're right. That is worse. I would rather see a movie that I go, you know what? That movie was passionately bad than that was like just so.
Well, and especially if there's a trade. If it's like, look, all I get is really bad or really good, I'll take that. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting watching these things come and go in waves, actually, which leads me to my next point, is that everything is so, okay, so someone makes Saw, and then there's all kinds of torture porn movies. And then someone makes Paranormal Activity, it kicks Saw's ass in it. and then Paranormal Activity kicks Saw's ass, or kicks, those kinds of movies ass, and then everyone's making Paranormal Activity knockoffs and stuff, right? And then there's a Creepy Doll. Now we have to have, Annabelle, and we have to have the Boy, and The Boy 2, Electric Boogaloo, right? So what I'm interested in is what will be, because right now the big dumb Arnold Schwarzenegger type movie that everyone goes and sees is the superhero genres, and I really feel like we're starting to wear thin, and it's getting kind of like zombie fatigue, where everyone's like, okay, now it's going to be another Thor with another person and another Captain America with another guy, and wasn't that guy already Valkyrie? Like, what's going on? Or not Valkyrie, Falcon. So I think it's going to be, so the question though is like, what could it possibly be? Like what is the future? What could replace superheroes?
Nothing, dude. I don't, I mean, the reason superheroes are big because it's like a 4-quadrant thing. Like you were saying, you get somehow grandma, who was, and grandpa who, I remember Captain America. And then, you got your kids who are like, fuck yeah, Captain America. Oh, yeah. Like, I don't know. That's why they're so smart for just how they have evolved that genre, and made it their own thing. And they've taken over the world with it. Like, the only thing I can think of that in terms of a genre, that takes it over is just either like your hard R-rated stuff. Like you're saying, like if there was if RoboCop came out and there was like it was like hardcore, and people were like, oh yeah, this is, they're not holding any punches, because people can tell if they're being, if they're kind of watering it down,
Well, we saw it with the PG-13 RoboCop. I mean, did you even remember that was a movie?
Barely, until you said it. I kind of was like, oh yeah, that came out,
Or Total Recall.
But like a great example, even though it's not a good example because it's a superhero, but Deadpool, that they could have totally watered that down and made it just like all the others, but they went hard. They're like, all right, I think that there's a market for a super hardcore superhero movie in this, and that was a big risk. That movie cost a lot of money, Yes. And then or a fair amount of money, not as much as most superhero movies, but still, it made bukus of bucks.
A lot for a movie that could have taken a crap.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, so it's kind of like, I think that, yeah, that kind of thing can get people in the theaters if it's like kind of like the Netflix style, basically. Netflix is a perfect example. It's like they're basically giving these amazing filmmakers carte blanche to they're just saying, here's $100 million, give us a great movie at the end. That's what people fucking want and have wanted. But it's like a studio, it's hard to take that risk, you know, to make sure you get butts and seats to get your investment back. So, but Netflix apparently has unending amounts of money. They spent like literally $13 billion on original content like this year or last year. So it's kind of like at that point, like that's what people want is great movies. It's a stupid thing to say, but that's
so
all
shocking.
they want. It's like wow,
so
give me a great movie and I'll go fucking see it, you know. But like it's hard to actually get that made somehow, you know.
I feel like they learn the wrong lessons all the time, especially studios. Big studios, like they'll make so Chris Nolan makes Batman and he does these dark and gritty Batmans. Everyone's like, "Oh, dark and gritty, that's how you do Batman," rather than thinking like good. And then what happens is then they go grab Zack Snyder and then they make a bunch of crappy stuff and then they're like, "Oh, apparently people don't like dark and gritty." It's like, no, they don't like crappy.
Right. He did it right.
Yeah, just make them good, man. It's like the reason that Guardians of the Galaxy does better than Suicide Squad isn't because Guardians is lighter or funnier. It's because it's good, and freaking Suicide Squad is trash. Like
at the end of the day, yeah, like you're right. Like it's just objectively like a fun movie that like you can see it's accessible and that can bring people in. Whereas Suicide Squad, it's just abrasive and it hurts your mind and ears.
You ever see like a kid like fall over or something and everyone laughs like at a party and like a
sure all the time.
And you know how you're out there at parties and there's kids. But then what happens is like the kid learns like, oh, that's funny. People like when I do that, and then they just keep doing like stuff the whole night trying to get people to laugh, and it's like really cringy. That's how like Suicide Squad feels to me, where it's like a guy who's like, do you like this? I played Queen. You like that? Like you know they did it in Guardians. Remember? Like you like that? You know, it's just rough, man.
That totally does come across, and it is like I think that's David Ayer's fault because he kind of is a little cringy to me. Just when I hear him talk, I'm just kind of like, you sound like an idiot. Like,
well, so many of these guys are so out of touch when you hear them in interviews. Like, I watch a lot of interviews for these reviews and stuff, and it's like shocking to hear the stuff these guys say. It's like, but it's also tough because how much of this is them trying to just control the message, and how much is that they have no idea what the heck, you know?
Well, I give some. Yeah, like press junkets for movies. Yeah. It seems like it's miserable, or at least like it seems like a lot of people that do them are miserable when they do them. But
especially because a lot of times it's like you're doing 8 in a day, and it's just like here's some other YouTuber I've never heard of, asking me like, so what made you want to make movies?
Well, right, it's more the same question probably thing that kind of gets probably old, and it makes it.
What's it like working with Beyonce?
Yeah, right. Yeah, what's it like? Well, I don't know. Yeah, I like it. I love that James Gunn got the opportunity. I mean, because I've followed him ever since the Troma days, So, like, I love that there's this trend. I mean, I give MCU or Marvel a ton of credit for being how big they are, and somebody will make they'll make one independent movie that makes that successful. Yeah, and then they'll give them the keys to the castle, to make. They'll give them $200 million to make a movie, and it's like, wow, that's really encouraging as an independent filmmaker. It's like
it's cool, but my concern is that they give them, I'm trying to think of an analogy, but it's like they kind of give them the keys to the castle, because what happens is I think a lot of times they're like, hey, that name is now like, it's almost like directors have replaced, or maybe not replaced, but have become an addition to star power actors, where it's like, hey, this movie has Brad Pitt in it. Now it's like, hey, this movie's directed by Josh Trank, and so like that will get butts and seats. And then what happens is Josh goes and tries to make a movie, and then they tie his hands behind his back. Do you not think it's that?
I wish it was like that. I wish that it was the directors had star power, because we need more Christopher Nolans and Quentin Tarantino's. There's the only and Scorsese. They're the only three people I feel like that actually are, like their movie at the top of the film is what drives people to go see it. They are the star of the movie, is the director. And but then I don't think that these MCU guys I'm talking about have that level yet. I think that other than the super film nerds, your super cinephiles who know James Gunn and whatever, but they spend so much money on that, like that contingent of people isn't really
It's
driving
too
the
small.
bus.
That's a great point.
It's I really believe that they think that they're the creative forces that behind these movies. So yeah, I know that James Gunn literally can't do anything in these movies. I know that Kevin Feige or whatever will rein these people in, but they want them to. I do believe that they'll say like, hey, put your stamp on this, make it your thing, and then we'll rein you in when we have to, and we have the final say. But to me, that's still encouraging that they're giving them, letting them put their. It's obvious that Taika Waititi, has his stamp on that movie on Thor 3.
No,
James
totally,
Gunn has a stamp on that, and the other ones too. But
real props to him too for like figuring Thor out. It's like no one gives a damn about those first two movies because he's just such a boring character. And someone again, Red Letter Media was bringing up how like someone finally figured out that Chris Hemsworth is actually a really, really funny actor, and he suffers from having leading man looks. And so people were trying to like throw him into these really bland, like I'm Thor and I'm concerned kind of roles because he has that look, but he's genuinely very funny.
Totally. And I think it took somebody also, like Taika, to like sit there and go, okay, if you really think about who Thor is and what this whole thing is, it's absurd. This is
Really
ridiculous.
absurd.
Yeah, like so let's really lean into that and have a wink the whole time, which I thought was cool.
I do too. Well, I think one of the things that's going to be really hard about replacing superhero movies too is that if you were to try to find something that was going to be the next, like this is what everyone's watching now, the big difficulty is that the superhero movies have like endless content of comics to pull from. And
that's
so,
true.
like,
yeah.
That's another reason it would be so difficult is because so much groundwork is laid out for these guys. And it's funny because I hear people complain a lot about how like, well, they've thrown out, Star Wars did it too. Where they're like, well, they've thrown out all the extended universe stuff. And it's like, well, they didn't throw it out. They have unshackled themselves from it so that when they do want to pull things that they can without then having to be like, well, if you're going to bring that in, then you have to bring in these other things because these are interconnected through like endless, novels that were written in the, 80s or whatever.
I'm not a comic book guy, so it's like every time I go see these movies, I have no idea what the fuck I'm going to go see. I just know, there's going to be big explosions and people in tights, and I'm going to have fun probably a little bit,
Well, and that's why I hate that argument when you're like, oh, I didn't really like that movie, and they're like, oh, but it's that's what happened in the comics. I don't know and or care.
I give a fuck.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like back to R-rated these comic movies, like Joker made $1 bajillion, and that's a great example of like I really enjoyed it because I just liked it on a movie level, and there were plenty of people who were like, oh, but in the comics, and it's like, dude, if the movie's good, that matters to me first. Like that's the first thing that's important.
It's actually funny you said Joker because we were talking about earlier about what is the future of movies. I think Joker is the future of movies, right? Where basically you trick the audience. You pull a fun bait and switch. You basically say, all right, we know that you're only going to come to the theater if you have a fucking property, an intellectual property that you have heard of before. So we're going to trick you into coming because you think it's, the next Spider-Man movie, but really we're going to give you this insane, different other genre, this psychological, existential black drama thing that that we're going to give you. I think that's really interesting.
I'm really glad you said that because I've been saying the same thing. Actually, man, maybe that's what I should make a video on is because I was saying I think the future of these movies, Star Wars and the MCU now suffer from the same problem where there is basically like the one type of movie that they make over and over and over again. And those worlds are deep enough now that the next thing I think we should start doing is off genre. And it should be like, I want to see a detective story in Star Wars, right? Or like a which they keep toying with, it's like they kind of did like Rogue One and it was supposed to be kind of more of a war movie, and it's like they went halfway. And then like Solo is supposed to be a little bit more of just a smuggler movie, and they kind of went halfway, but they're still so like there had to be Darth Maul, we got to have a lightsaber somewhere in there. I think these are developed enough worlds that we could just spend some time in the world doing something completely different. Do like a spy caper. Do a kid, G-rated kids film that has nothing to do with that, but we know like Twi'leks and stuff like that, right? And the MCU has the exact same kind of thing, and that's why I was so excited about the New Mutants when I saw that very first teaser trailer. That was actually kind of scary. I was like, oh, this looks like just a straight up horror movie that's going to be like connected to superpowers instead. That's a great idea. But the more that trailers come out, and of course this movie's never going to ever get released, but the poor movie, but the more it keeps getting, the more stuff I've seen of it, the more it just starts to look more like a traditional just X-Men movie. And it sucks because it's like, that is a great idea. I think just do a straight up horror movie, but instead of it being like the supernatural, it's superpowers,
Totally.
Do a
I
Western.
actually, yeah, exactly. Like the sky's the limit. You know, you
It
can really
is.
go
It
down the
is.
list of genres and make a superhero version of that, and people would go see it. You know,
Well, what's the freaking Mandalorian?
that's a good point. Yeah,
Great
totally.
example. It's just, they're doing Firefly, they're doing the Western kind of story. It's definitely that old, Japanese story, which is kind of funny to watch these. There's a Japanese story of the samurai with the baby, and then that gets translated into like a Western version, and then the Western version turns into the space version. It's kind of fun to watch like the
Yeah,
evolution of those. Um,
totally.
and so yeah,
Uh, I'm sorry. What were you gonna say?
no, nothing. I was
Oh, okay.
conceding
Yeah.
to you.
Okay. I just had one thought there. One more thing to add to our list of potential, you know, the genre of movie that's going to take over, and
Yeah.
is deep fakes, dude. You know,
Oh yeah.
okay. Like I really think that in the future, deep fakes are going to be the very near future. There's going to be a whole genre of movie where it's literally like, you know, it's gonna be a novelty for sure, a gimmick, but it'll be fun to see. Like, we'll go see The Godfather, you know, with any actor we want. We can probably
Yeah.
program him on our phone. Like John, well, like you can cast your own. Like, all right, I'll make John Travolta the Marlon Brando. Nicolas Cage will be James Caan, you know, and you can kind of like have all this funny. It's gonna be really hilarious technology, or you could be in it. You know, you and your
Yeah.
family can
You and your
see
friends.
fucking, you know, yeah, the Infinity War, and then you guys all become the Avengers along the way. You just upload a picture of yourself on your phone, you know, and that'd be hilarious, right?
I could see that in the near future for sure. And I think as the future goes forward, what's got me thinking about a similar vein of thought has been how they keep replacing all these posthumous actors, right?
Exactly.
And so it's like, what happens when eventually a studio just gets you into a contract where they're like, hey, we're making a movie. We don't need you to show up. We have enough like face footage of you, and we have enough of like your vocal profile that we're gonna like run it all through a system, and like you're just gonna be an actor in this movie, and you didn't even ever do anything because we own you. Like,
That's absolutely going to happen. Oh,
I
I
think
mean, well, not that contractual part about it, but yeah, people are. I think it's going to be more like trolly. Like you're not going to be able to you're not going to be able to contain this technology. Basically,
well,
there's going to be movies that kids are going to make in their homes of, you know,
definitely that,
anybody
yeah.
doing anything. You know.
Well, and you could kind of do that now. We've already seen like Joe Rogan has so much footage of his face and him talking that people have been using him a lot because there's like millions of hours basically of his like 3 hour podcast. And so we've already seen people doing where even the audio part's the interesting one where it's like you writing out sentences and getting it to sound like it's actually him talking, explaining those.
Well, you usually have to get a voice actor to do that part, right?
Usually, but someone did put an AI thing together where they literally just wrote the lines and they actually had the AI using like his vocal profile to do it. That's the
Oh,
part that
scary,
makes it where
dude.
they can actually replace you, and that's
That
what's
is
interesting.
incredible.
But even
Hell
if
yeah.
you did want to do it today without using that technology, then you're right. You could just find someone who's really good at impressions, and you could have like one guy voice acting for like 3 different male actors.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And then you're using their faces and doing the deep fake thing. It's fascinating, but I'm telling you, I think that we could see a situation where like trauma, like asylum, like studios start doing that kind of thing. And it's like, if hey, you're in one of my movies, there's like this little fine print that says we actually own the rights to be able to do that kind of thing for the next 20 years, and we'll get you in some stupid little 10-minute movie, and then from then on we can go make these big old, because imagine like Asylum being able to make like transmorphers, but it actually has like Shia LaBeouf, the deep fake in it.
Dude, yeah, it's kind of like how like like Elvis or these people that signed these shitty contracts when they were like 20 years old, and then all of a sudden, their entire careers they were owned, for half of their earnings. It's like, yeah, I could see some like exactly what you just said. Some
Yep.
young actor signs their image away when they're young, and next thing you know, they're a famous actor, but they never acted in the movies or got any of the money, but they just signed their image away, and they're
Or
like
they get these
waiters
like
somewhere.
they have like this really terrible royalty, like 1% off of like
Yeah,
box office or whatever. They don't even
that's.
play in the theaters. Yeah.
Have you ever seen the movie Simone with
No,
Al Pacino?
no, I missed that one.
It's a pretty great movie. It's
Yeah,
it's about him making an AI
I
actress.
lied. I did see that.
Yeah, okay, there you
All
go.
right, I did. That was on like HBO or something back in the day. Yeah.
It's a good one.
Yeah, right. No, you're totally right. But that's what's funny is it's that without it having to be fake. It's like you could be convincing people that it's actually Natalie Portman or something like that. Well, and
Yeah.
again, because imagine a Ryan Reynolds doing like two guys are growing a pizza place. And it's like, oh, little did you know there was this piece in your contract. And now that you're the Ryan Reynolds,
Right.
when we make the Pizza Place movie, we just have this robot playing you. Well, then, I mean, if you really want to put like a tinfoil hat on, or if you really want to go crazy, we go 30 years in the future. Now AIs are like writing movies because you can feed it a million scripts, and feed it.
I think that's
box
going to
office
be a
numbers.
weird. I think that's kind of similar to like the deep imaging things or the deep fakes. Like that's going to be a fun gimmick. Like you're like, oh,
Yeah.
let's see what the movie computer says when we input this, and this, and then ha ha ha, look at it. It's kind of like, but I don't think people are going to be looking to like, oh, this computer came out with Citizen Kane of movies.
This is art. Yeah.
This is real art. Maybe, I don't know. I could say that, like I could, and be proven wrong later, and actually like the best art in the future is all from computers. Like,
I'm
but
with
then
you.
I do think that there's a moment, or there's a thing in the human psyche where you're like I guess if you know that going into it, you probably are not likely to take it as seriously. But if you maybe if you saw two paintings side by side and you're like, what is art? And you picked one and you're like, oh, that was made by computer. We probably are already at that point.
Well, here's what I could see. Because I completely agree with you. I think that there's basically AI would have to be so advanced that it would have to basically be like a singularity problem for it to understand the human condition well enough to write some like art that brought me to tears. But having said that, could a really advanced AI system that we have even now maybe make something like The Ridiculous Six? Maybe, if it's a really dumb action film.
Yeah.
And the dialogue already wasn't interesting,
it absolutely would probably be better at making a dumb action film if you fed it a whole bunch of dumb action films, because it's just kind of, they're all the same. It's like a cookie cutter thing. But I do think that, to your point earlier, a second ago, like if you fed the thing, the 100 best works that legitimately make people cry, and then it doesn't know why they make you cry. It just is like, oh, well, I'm going to replicate this, and make it, whatever, evolve it or whatever, somehow. I don't know. I'm not a computer
It's a
scientist,
fascinating
so
question, because now one of the questions then is like, how actually quantifiable are people? And I think that if you were to actually talk to people who legit understood like Facebook behind the scenes algorithm stuff, you'd probably be scared at how quantifiable we are.
I believe it, dude.
Because I think Lawrence was talking about at one point how it's like a lot of those algorithms will actually purposefully try to hide and like mask how well they know you. And like when they give you suggestions for things to see, they'll like purposely throw stuff in there that they know that you'll hate, so that you go, okay, he doesn't have me completely pegged yet. But like in reality, they know exactly the kind of stuff you want to look at. And it would be interesting. It would be a very interesting task to see, like, at minimum, just how quantifiable are people. If we press this button every time, do people cry every time? We kind of know that if you see someone kick a dog, it's like a guaranteed everyone's gonna be like, oh, that's the bad guy. We now know. Someone has to put their dog down and the dog cries and it looks at them. It's like everyone is like, yep, that's the saddest thing I'll see all day.
It's true.
So then it's a question of like, if we are really that quantifiable, then why couldn't a computer, get enough data and then figure it out? So it's, I don't know, maybe that's what Stadia will do. It'll start making these heavy rain type games where it's got enough processing power to be like...
I think we're pretty damn quantifiable. But yeah, we're quantifiable up to a point. It's kind of like you never know. I don't think computers necessarily can predict the next thing, you know what I mean? But they can definitely they can be given what we already respond to, and then do it well. So it's kind of like but I think the organic humans are the innovators. At least I hope.
Well,
I think that.
Well, but then there's a really interesting question then about like almost a cybernetic connection between the two of you, right? You have like, I'm the writer, and then I have this really advanced tool, like writing tool, right? So it's like, as I'm writing, it kind of has like that Mr. Clippy that shows up, and he's like, hey, I see that you're trying to, have this emotional kind of thing. Try maybe these ideas or whatever. Like that could be really interesting.
That actually, that's a good point. Is that
a marriage?
Yeah, real human beings using AI as kind of to supplement their material. I like it. Good idea.
Interesting. So yeah, just one more thing I wanted to get into a little bit. It's something I already made a video on, but I just want to talk to other people about it because I think it's interesting. Is I don't know if you've noticed, but I feel like I've started noticing that we are starting to get a little 80s fatigued, and we're kind of breaking into more 90s content.
Okay.
We're seeing what do you call it? Like Captain Marvel, is a 90s thing. Mm-hmm. And there was something I wish I wrote it down because my friend was just telling me about it too. But it's another. Oh, it was the Fresh Prince. What's that?
Captain Marvel wasn't a huge hit, right? Or am I,
Oh no, terrible. No, the point wasn't supposed to be that it was good, but it's just that we're starting to. I feel like what they're. I think the 30-year cycle is starting to push us into 90s content over 80s content. People who what do you call it? Jonah Hill did mid 90s, and it's very apt time for us to start breaking into these kind of like we're going to start moving out of the 80s and into more 90s content. I mean, like, have you done a lot of thinking or talking about like the 20-year cycle at all as far as movies go?
I'm not familiar with that term.
Okay, great. So before I go deeper into it, this is a good point for me to explain that a little bit. So the idea is that roughly every 20, 30 years, the children who were consuming media at one age are now the people who are old enough that they're creating the next set of media. So George Lucas and Scorsese and Steven Spielberg grew up in the 50s watching 50s content, and then in the 70s they made a whole bunch of stuff that was based on you had E.T. and these kind of things were based on these kind of 50s times. The reason we don't see it a lot earlier than the 50s is because to be real nostalgic about stuff that other people would have a point of reference for about the 30s, you have to reference like stage plays and radio and stuff like that.
Right,
so it's not quite as tangible. But in the 70s, if you want to make something like Happy Days, then everyone is like, yeah, I remember that stuff because like we were there and watching TV and we have a really good frame of reference, and you have good you can go back and watch the Andy Griffith Show to understand how things looked. So when you make Happy Days, you're like, oh yeah, just make it look like that, right?
Yeah.
So what happened is we have all these guys who in the 70s were making content that was nostalgic about the 50s. Well, then you have guys like J.J. Abrams who grew up being nostalgic about stuff about the 70s with Steven Spielberg.
Or the 80s. Yeah.
Well, exactly right. And so that's what we're doing now is that we're in a 20-year cycle, a 30-year cycle right now that is hyper focused on the 80s. But I feel like we're coming off of the tail end of that curve. I think that like another Stranger Things would make people kind of go like, yeah, more 80s stuff. I mean, you remember how zombies felt. It was like, man, if I see another zombie, I'm going to shoot myself, So what's interesting to me is I feel like that 20-year cycle, that 30-year cycle is pushing us into the 90s now. But then my question is, what's going to come after the 90s? I feel like we're going to hit a wall.
2010s or 2000s or whatever, right?
Well, okay, so here's what's funny, right? You would think that, but here's why I think it works and why it will fall apart is I think the same thing that makes it why we didn't have one about the 30s and 40s is the same reason why we won't have one about the 2010s. Because if I walk into a Walmart and I yell up, did I do that? Everyone knows who I'm talking about, right? If I make a Baywatch reference, everyone kind of understood Baywatch, or they all kind of watched TGIF. So what happens is in the 2000s and the 2010s, we started getting Netflix and Napster and iTunes and, Spotify and Pandora. People didn't all listen to the same 3 radio stations anymore. They didn't all watch the same TV channel. So everyone started becoming much more entertainment started becoming like personal entertainment, where it's like for instance, I'm 30 now, right? I know more words to Britney Spears songs than I do Lady Gaga songs because I never had to listen to Lady Gaga. But Britney Spears was like inescapable. It's like you couldn't, everyone listened to the same couple of radio stations. So if you listen to the hits radio station, that's what you heard. But I don't have to listen to the hits anymore. I can just find like this really obscure Swedish music that I listen to,
Yeah, no, everything you're saying is actually really good points. It's funny, like literally, I remember it was like 2001 or 2002 or something, and the first time I kept hearing people being like, "Oh man, remember the '90s, man?" And I'm like, guys, we just ended that. Like that was
a couple days ago, bro.
Very recently, and I think that I don't know whether this might be just every generation, but I feel like it's definitely our generation is like we're hyper nostalgia focused. We love it. It's like the millionth time that I've had my fucking conversation of like, hey, remember Snick and Nickelodeon and all that cool stuff? I'm like, dude, yes, of course I remember that.
It's not that long ago.
Yeah, it's like people get high off of talking about Doug, and Rugrats, and it's like I'm like, is this always how it's been? Like, are people just that nostalgic about their childhoods? And I think that's part of it. But I think that there is like this weird thing where people are ultra nostalgic now. Like, I hated Super 8 because to me it's like it's just aping an aesthetic, and there's nothing behind it. You're just making it like the heartwarming kind of John Williams-esque music with your light flares, and your cool looking kids with plaid shirts on. Like, to me, that's like so hollow,
Hollow.
Whereas Stranger Things, at least they're very upfront about like, okay, this is a mishmash of aesthetics, and it is kind of this send up to a time, but it's also very good by itself, and the effects are cool. To me, Super 8 was just aping everything he'd seen earlier.
I could barely tell you what it's about.
Yeah, it sucks. I
Yeah.
hate the movie. But
I love that you brought up Super 8 specifically, because that's actually the movie I used to explain in the video I made about remakes. I was saying how there's people who would call J.J. Abrams just a ripoff, basically, of Steven Spielberg, and I use Super 8 as the example.
Yeah, it is. It literally is a ripoff of Steven Spielberg. I mean, like, it should just say Steven Spielberg, the movie. You know,
There's a level that's homage, and then there's like a further level that's too much.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's a difference, and it's kind of one of those things, you know it when you see it, kind of things. But I had never really thought about what the way you had said it, like how we are so everyone has so many different things that they're listening to or consuming or watching. Like what are the reference points going to be? Because I feel like our reference points now are just reference points from in the past, you know? Yeah. So, I mean, I guess it is the whole Joseph Campbell kind of like, you know, stories repeating themselves kind of thing, but it's different now. It seems like a different beast. And to answer your question, I think that when people make movies about the 2000s and 2010s, I think that it's going to be less maybe about what we're consuming now and more about like, kind of like the early days of the internet, the early days of social media, the early like us kind of not really knowing how the hindsight of the future of social media and stuff, and people are going to look back at today and these times, it's going to be like, oh, look how cute they are, they're making their stupid little, you know, vines and stuff, and they didn't know what it was going to become back 20 years from now in the future that we live in, you know. That's I think that's what this era is going to be kind of defined at, is us kind of awkwardly fumbling through this new technology that we have.
But will that replace the need for, because I feel like the reason we do so much rehashing and so many remakes and reboots is because you want that pre-sold market. You know, if I want to make a cop a movie about a cybernetic cop, then trying to make my version of like Cyber Cop is going to be a lot harder to sell to a studio than making RoboCop, because people go, oh, RoboCop, I know that, I'll go see that, whatever. And so it's like, I totally agree with what you're saying, but will that necessarily be the same thing? You know, like we'll be like, oh, that's gonna get butts in seats, you know?
Oh no, yeah, no. I guess I'm just talking about when these time periods are kind of represented
when their turn.
Yeah, in terms of what you're saying though, in terms of like making the media that was popular 20, 30 years ago, you know, and that being kind of a nostalgia trip, like yeah, I don't know. You're right. I don't know what will get butts in seats in terms of like the intellectual properties that are big now, because it's just such, everyone has their own little niche. Yeah.
So then maybe that's what it is, right? Maybe what happens is people start making movies for everyone who was in the scene in the 2006 or whatever, right? So like we're gonna make a movie that feels like My Chemical Romance the movie for those people who were in that scene. You know, we'll make something that's about, I don't know, something else that was popular for those people who were into that.
Yeah.
You know, maybe.
There's
the same idea, but smaller.
That bridge everybody these days. You're totally right. There's very few things that like everyone knows. Like we all experience this one thing. It's like what the Super Bowl is like the only thing.
Tragedies.
I can think of. Tragedies and Super Bowl. And I don't know. I literally can't think of any more where we all share it, where we all know like everyone's gonna be doing the same thing.
All of us know big popular songs from Tupac and Biggie, but not all of us are like into. I couldn't even name a rapper right now that I would even want to put in the same breath as those guys as far as popularity goes. You know, Kendrick Lamar, like none of those guys are ubiquitous. I almost feel like he's really popular in almost like the nerd circle. I don't feel like if I were to grab some random girl in Walmart who was really into like, whatever lame song was on the radio right now, you know, that she would, if she was really into like Lil Uzi Vert, would she also be into, Childish Gambino? Like maybe.
I think he's pretty big, but yeah, you might be right. I don't know.
I think part of it is that also Donald Glover is like one of those, like you said, 4-quadrant actors anyway, or not actors, but like just artists. He's like a Renaissance man today. So if people, even if they don't necessarily love like all of his music, they probably know Childish Gambino because they know him as an actor or a comedian. Or for me, like he's so crazy for me. He's such a big deal because I grew up in like early YouTube with Derek Comedy.
Derek Comedy, dude. I love the shit out of it.
Blows my mind watching like that guy who's in these. First off, it's a shock he hasn't been canceled from some of the stuff that's in that.
Oh, for real, dude. That shit was hardcore.
It was hard. Even at the time, it was shocking.
Yeah.
And
the spelling bee skit.
The spelling bee is the big one. Yeah, that one is crazy. but genuinely hilarious. And it's also why I don't believe that there's any such thing. This is like a very personal diatribe, but like I don't believe that there's any such thing as a taboo topic or concept. I think execution matters a lot.
Yeah,
And
I agree with that.
The video I put out yesterday was about how feminism in movies isn't the problem. It's that when the thing that started it was, I just want to make a movie to browbeat people for an hour and a half, and then the movie comes second. If you have a crappy movie, that's when it gets really annoying. And I think it's the same thing with like bad jokes. If you make like a Holocaust joke that's really unfunny and crappy and you just threw it together, then like it's going to be very offensive. But like Dave Chappelle, did a whole 2 bits about rape, basically, with the whole like, hey, he rapes but he saves, and that I was cracking up like that. And he actually, it was really clever in the structure of it, because the first time he does the joke during that set, it actually isn't really super funny, and you're kind of like awkward and like, I don't know. But when he brings it back at the end with the Bill Cosby reference, you're like, oh my god, like that's such a great point. It's
yeah,
really
I mean,
funny.
it's totally different strokes for different folks, kind of thing. I mean, like I'm somebody that's like you, like I wanna be hit with everything, that even the stuff that's uncomfortable. Some people are like, I don't know, what are you doing? I don't want to. Oh, sorry, some video just started while I was. Sorry.
That's fine.
I'm
No, and I agree.
but to finish my point, yes, some people are just like they don't want that in their comedy or something, and that's the complaint. Where it's just kind of like, all right, well, don't watch it, but whatever.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you that it's all about the execution, and you don't. But that's what's so kind of vague about it, and what's hard, and kind of what creates a lot of conflict is because you can't explain it, really. You can't say why this joke is funnier than the other, and if you do, it kind of makes it not funny and breaks it down, and it's like, and then you kind of come off bad trying to defend a stupid joke or whatever. So it's kind of like this weird thing. You only know it when you see it. That made me laugh. Did it make you laugh? It was pretty. It was a taboo subject. I don't know. Like,
well, it'd be like you like anchovies and I don't, right? Well, why? It's like they taste good to me. Like I just, like
right.
You taste the same thing I taste. To me, it's good. To you, it's not. Like I don't know what to say. Yeah, I agree with that. Honestly, too, like not to put you guys in the box either, but like it's something I have been encouraged by the stuff that you guys get away with. and to an extent, I don't even know if it's necessarily that you get away with it. It's just that you guys don't make such a big deal out of the probably inevitable people who are like, oh my god, I can't believe they're making those kinds of jokes, and it's just.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I didn't mean to break you off.
No. I wasn't gonna make necessarily much more of a point. I was just gonna hit home on, like, for instance, I was just watching one of the videos. I think it was one John Reisinger was in, where they were talking about when they were on the spot and or doing his show on the spot, and then like their team name was like Team 4 Working Legs, and they're playing against Zach. It's like those are jokes that other people potentially would be like, oh, we're having a hashtag they're over party. And I feel like there's almost this thing. Well, actually, okay, not to get hyper political, but this is a thing I talk about with like Donald Trump. Like Donald Trump doesn't sell to people that, hey, I am a morally upstanding person. So when he does something that's not morally upstanding, it's like, well, how come his base doesn't mind? It's like, well, because he never was selling that brand in the first place, right? And so, man, I'm about to sound like I'm comparing you guys to Donald Trump. So I don't mean it like that. I'm sorry. But it's like, I think with Funhaus, it's like they've done such a good job of like, hey, look, this is who we are, and these are the kind of jokes we make. And so if you were trying to play like one foot in both ends or whatever, then it wouldn't really work. But because people know to expect that, like, hey, look, these guys aren't a bunch of racists and sexist and whatever. Like, they're just funny guys making jokes that come off the cuff, and there's going to be stuff that's going to be offensive, and it is what it is, and they double down on it. Like, that's great, And so it's been encouraging, because I'm like, oh, okay, you can be free like that. It's like, depending on what you watch, you may feel like that's not possible. Like, we're in a world these days where you have to be super careful all the time, or else,
No, I totally agree with what you just said. It was very encouraging, because I'd come from other worlds where, like I'm sitting there going like, oh shit, like it seems like everything that's cool to talk about, you're not allowed, you don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Whereas when I came to Funhaus, everyone's so awesome and cool and smart, and they're great people, and they're making these awful jokes sometimes, that are like, wow, you went there. And then, then it's like, you love it for that reason, because it's like, it's coming from a great place, and it's not everyone's cup of tea to hear, people with cerebral palsy get made fun of to their face. But like, it's like, if that person's cool with it and everyone else around is cool with it, and we're all having fun, what the fuck is wrong? There's nothing.
Yes.
opinion. Like,
and I had never believed too, from watching as much as I watch now too. Like, I would never believe that at any point, if someone did feel like the line was crossed, that person would be like, well, screw off. Like, I believe every one of you guys would be like, oh, well, hey, sorry, man. Like, that's not where I'm trying to go or something like that. So that's the thing too, is like you said, I believe it comes from a good place as well,
Yeah.
And so it's just really cool to see like that level of like maturity. And you guys are so lucky that you're a team of just such genuinely funny, charismatic people too.
I appreciate that. I love all those people.
It's amazing. It really, like, I've been
talented.
very happy. Yeah, they really, well, that's the thing. It's like, that's what I'm saying. You guys have like this awesome, there's so many of them, and they're all so talented and so funny and so personable. You have so many of these things working at the same time and so skilled. It's crazy that you got so lucky to have that, level of people all at the same time, on top of each other. It's like, that's a very rare thing you guys
They did a great job of hiring people. Fuck.
Yeah, that's it.
As one of the last hires, they did a great job.
Well, it's kind of funny you talk about that too, because they do evolve over time, right? Like, Rooster Teeth is so interesting to see what giant it turned into. I have a kind of weird background with them because, we all found them from like pre-YouTube with Red versus Blue, right? And then what happens is like they started going through this evolution where they got bigger and they had like their YouTube channel and stuff, but they still were like, I don't know, 15 people or something. And they started picking up people like Michael Jones, where they picked him up from his own thing with like Rage Quit. And then they picked up like what's his face? Jordan, who did like the RT, animated adventures. Before he was just doing them like bootlegged. And then they like found him and like picked him up and stuff like that. But then it's like you only go a couple more years forward, and it's like, well, we have like hiring staff and people put in like resumes and stuff like that. So it's interesting trying to like, how long they got away kind of having that image of like, hey, we're just a couple of dudes hanging out, but really it's like this like 100-person corporation,
Yeah, dude. Now at this point, it's a machine. I mean, we're literally owned by Warner Brothers.
I know, it's nutty. It's so nutty, especially for something that started with like 4 guys.
Yeah.
I was it was funny because I was making like a bootleg video game, something like that, back in like 2013 or whatever, based on when there was that joke going around of Gavin and Ray when they were like X-Ray and Vav or whatever. And it was just so funny seeing like how I got to do like some email correspondence back and forth with some of the people from Rooster Teeth, and I was like, oh, this is such a different animal now. Like, this is like this, I was talking to like their business rep and stuff.
Yeah.
Like that. It was so funny seeing like how that thing had evolved. So now it's like, yeah. So actually, what is the origin of Funhaus itself? It's like, it seems like they started with, what was the name of that previous company they were with?
Machinima.
Right. And so
Inside Gaming and Machinima.
Was Funhaus like Inside Gaming? That's what I'm thinking of, right? So it's like, did they end up building Funhaus like from the Rooster Teeth side and fill it with Inside Gaming guys, or did that already translate and then Funhaus got picked up? As I asked the newest guy to that.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. To be honest, you're asking the wrong person about this.
Yeah, totally.
I will be like, oh, so James, were you like the third guy? And he'll be like, actually, and he'll like explain everything, and like, so I really still am not totally clear about the entire origin.
That's okay.
From what I can tell, it's like, yeah, they all met at Machinima. Adam had his own show called Inside Halo. That got morphed into Inside Gaming. And then at some point, they started doing gameplays and not just movie news. And then at some point, they had a falling out with Machinima and said, hey, we're getting the fuck out of here unless you guys give us more stuff or whatever. I don't know what it was. Whatever the case, put words in their mouth. But yeah, then Machinima said sayonara, and then they hooked up with Bernie Burns from Rooster Teeth, and then the rest is history, I think, is the story.
That's cool. Yeah,
I worked there,
and that's kind of what I picked up too. Yeah, no, and I get it because I don't think it's necessarily like extremely cut and dry. I'm sure people are gonna eat me alive in the comments, like, dude, obviously it's just blah 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 blah.
What the fuck, Ryan?
But it is but no, the reason that it's unique and interesting, the reason I even bring it up is just because a lot of these other things were like, hey, we have guys who are internal, and then they went and created a show. They created Achievement Hunter, and so it's almost like with this one, it feels like they picked up a separate like pre-built Achievement Hunter to attach onto, so like that was very interesting. And then you guys even just being like in different states and stuff like that is very interesting too, to see that growth, because they had brought up a long time ago. They had just brought up that concept that like, hey, we're on the internet, we could be anywhere, we could be in Montana.
Totally.
We're seeing that now.
Yeah, and I love because I love the Achievement Hunter guys, and I love just the kind of balance of the two, the yin and the yang of Funhaus and Achievement Hunter, because we're doing kind of similar stuff, but it's like we have definitely different personalities, different tones and stuff, but everyone's really good friends too. It's cool.
Well, and your structure is very specific too, which is kind of cool. Yeah, when you watch Funhaus content, you don't feel like you're just watching more Achievement Hunter content, which is cool.
Right,
cool
yeah, it's different enough.
And you guys definitely have a well-oiled machine for sure. Like, it's been cool watching a lot of it and kind of getting to see, like, okay, so this is kind of the workflow scenario, and it's very efficient. Like, you guys pump out a lot of content. And now, of course, you guys are stuck all at home trying to figure it out, which is a nightmare.
Yeah, for fucking real, dude.
Sure. But it's pretty cool, man. Well, all right, brother. Yeah, man, I think that's kind of the show today. I really appreciate the time.
Oh man, thanks for having me, dude. This is fun. This is a fun conversation. I like talking about the future of movies, dude. I love movies. So
I do too. And I hope they keep making them. So it's yeah, it's but there's one last little tag thing is I've talked about this with music as well, where it's like the best thing that happened to rock and roll was that it kind of died and rap took it over as the new most popular music.
What? I wish rock and roll was still around.
Well, it is though, and that's the thing is that what happens is like my theory is that my working theory is that pop music really should just be whatever the most popular music of the time is. And I think growing up in high school for me, rock and roll was actually like pop music. It was like if you turned on top 40s, you would hear like Nickelback. So what happens is when your music is popular enough, it's that same problem of PG-13 movies where it has to become so homogenous that grandma can listen to it on the radio. So eventually you keep getting lamer and lamer and lamer mainstream bands until you do get Nickelback. And then once you get too many Nickelbacks, everyone says, man, this sucks. And then they stop listening to it. But here's what happens. All it does is like it dies on the radio and like the big top 40 stuff. But then you're left with people who just care about making really quality music. And so like the best thing that happened to it was it kind of falling off. And now I feel like it's easier to find. There's like this the people who were making just really quality stuff have more exposure than they would have if they're competing against these huge rock groups. Rap now is suffering from that same problem where there's all this really crappy, homogenous, just lame rap that's like really popular on top 40. And so if rap were to eventually get to this point where it had a critical mass and it fails, then it would go back to just underground people who care about the music. You seem like you have a counterpoint.
Oh, well, no, yeah, I disagree.
Okay, yeah, what do you got?
Just because I think that like I think that rock and roll and rap are just kind of two different things, and like rock was popular for a long time, but everyone liked it. But I don't think that because there was all these shittier, lame rock bands like Nickelback that turned everyone off to rock and roll. I think that just hip hop and rap is just people want to dance. People want to fucking girls and that want to go.
That's a great point.
Stuff. It's like I'll take a shitty rap beat that I can hang out and dance to. It's just not cool to go to a sweaty rock concert anymore and watch people don't like I'll go and people will be moshing and stuff and everyone's just kind of getting out like get the fuck away from me whereas back when I was growing up everyone's like yeah let's go fuck yeah let's go.
Yeah.
It's I feel like
and those people still exist. It's just not mainstream.
Well, what you're saying, it's like there's the people that really care about it that are still doing it, and it's not mainstream, but it was for a while, and I don't think it's ever going to come back. I think that those days are done, and that rap I think is here to stay as the dominant hip-hop.
That's interesting. Okay.
Because of just the dance factor, and that's why DJs and stuff. EDM. I
was gonna say EDM. Yep, totally same thing. Right. No, that's a very interesting point.
It serves a utilitarian function other than just being good music.
It very much so does, and that's very interesting. That's a great point you bring up. That puts a hole in my metaphor, but what I was trying to use it for is basically I think that with movies we could see something like that. If there does end up being a collapse of the $100 million movie, that could end up being ultimately a good thing for us because that may open up pathways for more of these like A24 type movies that are like, hey, look, we made this thing for, $8 million or something, but we really like worked our ass off. You brought up Deadpool earlier, and that was a point I've been saying for a long time was I wasn't necessarily a massive fan of Deadpool, but I was so happy that it was made and it made a lot of money because it proved a point that I've been trying to say as well is that we could have these R-rated movies. We all grew up with these children's properties as kids, but now that we're adults, it would be so dope to get like a really great R-rated Star Wars movie. Imagine like I'd be so into that, right? And there's plenty of stuff in the games that kind of feel that way. And so with when we started getting like Logan, like that blew my mind. It's one of my all-time favorite superhero movies because it's barely a superhero movie, right? It's just a great movie. and then Joker, barely a superhero movie. Like it's light gossamer, superhero over it, where it's really just like a Scorsese film.
Right.
And I think both of those owe direct thanks to Deadpool. And so it's like,
okay, yeah, totally.
So that's what I'm kind of hoping.
And I'm the guy that like you were talking about, like, you didn't like Deadpool. I fucking love Deadpool. Deadpool really blew my mind, and I'm not somebody who read the comics. I just went and I just saw a great movie that cracked me up and really shocked me, because there was like some violence in there that was really like, oh my god. So I'm the perfect audience member for that movie. That not familiar.
Well,
with
loved it. And I definitely didn't chagrin it. Like, I wasn't like, you shouldn't like it. It was just it's one of those things. Well, and that's the thing I'm trying to get better about too, being older, is that like just some things aren't bad. They're just not for me. So I did a review of Sonic, and it was by no means like, this sucked. This kid's movie didn't appeal to a 30-year-old man. I don't get it. It was like, dude, I saw it. It wasn't for me. Your kids will probably think it's fine. There's some stuff that they could have done differently, but I don't know if a kid would have noticed those things. It's like, well, I mean, the story beats all fall apart in the third act because the connection between, it's like, that's, I know I wasn't.
Sonic go fast.
It's like, yes, you could. Well, actually, Bernie Burns brought up a great point about that one time. He was saying how he hated Cars 2, and when he asked his son after, because he said he didn't even know what the hell the movie was about after it was over when they left the theater, and he asked his son, who's real young, he's like, hey, what was that movie about? And he was like, Lightning McQueen won the race. He's like, okay.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
So it's like, it's a great plus. So that's why I'm like, I'm not going to go so hard on these kids movies. Although there's a great counterpoint. Lindsay Ellis, I don't know if you're familiar with her. She was the nostalgia chick. She brought up a great counterpoint at one point. She was saying that entertainment is the only thing that we say. So what if it sucks? It's just for my kids. It's a good point. She's like,
true. Yeah.
You wouldn't say that about a car seat.
Right.
And so I do think in the long run, there's value in, I think I'll put it, it's like, there's value in having relatively aspirational art for children that is a little bit more complicated maybe than they can reach. And so it gives them something to kind of like reach up towards. And if we're only ever making prol feed for kids that's like, hey, look, if the kids can handle an 8 in complexity, we're going to give them 7s and 6s all the time, then it's like, there could be more value going to those kids. And I feel like when you and I grew up, there was a lot of, like, one of my favorite kids movies, back in the day was Never Ending Story. And there's a hardcore horse drowning scene.
Yeah, there is.
Really hard.
Yeah.
It's so good. It still holds up to this day. Like, it's still just as sad. Or like when he's talking to the fucking Rockbiter at the end. Rockbiter's explaining how he's going to commit suicide.
Yeah, that movie is hardcore. I wish kids movies were more hardcore.
And that's what I'm getting at, is I think, like, I probably wasn't necessarily ready for the themes of, like, suicide and stuff like that, but it gave it to me in this way that was, like, a little bit above me. So then I could have, like, a conversation with my parents and kind of, like, work up to that. And I think what would be a tragedy to me would be that if movies didn't inspire kids like that anymore, and they were all just kind of, like, so easy to absorb and just kind of dumb, that it made kids not fall in love with movies at a young age anymore. Like, that would be sad to me.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I don't think that necessarily those things totally go hand in hand. Like, I think that there can be very entertaining kiddie kind of movies that don't have to go into the heavy themes like of a never-ending story. But I wish that there was both. I wish that, we could have, like, because you're right. When I go see a kids movie today, I just know that it's not going to be anything that I will give a fuck about. But if I was old, if I had a kid back when Never-Ending Story came out, I can still see myself enjoying that film, And
yeah, definitely. Right.
Not saying that every kid movie has to be enjoyed by adults and kids alike, but it's just the fact that there's intense things going on. There's like real life shit going down, and I wish that yeah. So I agree with you on that point.
Yeah, it's interesting, and again, I don't think I know I speak in extreme terms. I don't think anything is going all one way or all one other way, but it's just very interesting thinking about just like, what are the next 10, 20 years going to be like? And I think if you asked me in 1998, I for sure was not, well, first off, I'd be 8 years old. But second of all, I definitely wasn't going to tell you, like, you know what? I think for the next, like, 20 years, it's going to be nothing but superhero movies. Like, an insane amount of superhero movies. And
I remember when Sam Raimi's Spider-Man came out, that was like 2001, and it made, it was something crazy. It was, I want to say it was $50 million in a weekend, or Was that big at the time? Or maybe it was 150. I don't know.
That's what's hard to say.
It was something that at the time everyone was like, "Whoa, that is a huge ass number for a movie, one movie to make in one weekend." And
in a weekend, I think in 2000
on,
or 2001, that would still be a lot. Even 50 would be a lot back then, I think. But that like, and then like X-Men, you know, was also like, there's a funny thing to be said for Kevin Smith talks about this a lot, how it's like they were embarrassed of comic books when they were making those first ones. And the first Batman movie in '89, in the tagline in the beginning, like when it's saying, you know, like the intro credits, it's like based on the popular magazines by DC Comics or whatever. Like they're afraid to use the word comics. And then when X-Men comes out, everyone's dressed like they're in the Matrix. And then there's even like the joke at the end of Cyclops where he's like, "Oh, what'd you expect? Like yellow spandex?" And that's like, well, I mean, yeah, kind of.
Yeah, that's what we fucking came to see.
Well, it would be funny to do a side by side of like that, and then show like the newest, you know, Apocalypse or whatever, where they all are dressed in basically like comic accurate, you know, and suits and stuff. So there's an argument to like whether or not that was a matter if people were always ready for that and we could have accepted it and they finally caught up to us, or if we got trained over time to like loosen up and stop being so uptight about that.
No, I think the nerds, they finally realized the power of the nerds en masse. We drive the narrative of your movie, bitch.
Well, and find people who will loosen their purse strings, right? Like find the people who will spend the money. And nerds have for a long time been the kinds of people who are like, yeah, this is my vintage, you know, Aragorn replica sword that's, you know, extremely expensive or whatever. It's the one that they found on set and they stole it and sold it or whatever, you know. Yeah. Or here's my like thousands of dollars of comic books or whatever. So it's like, yeah, if you can get directly tapped into those guys, there's a lot of money that those people will, you know, release to go see these big movies. So it'll be interesting, man. But like I said, man, it was awesome talking to you. Really appreciate you.
Dude, thanks, Chad, for having me, man. This has been fun.
Oh, this is a total blast, man. No, seriously, thank you. Yeah, I'm really bad at sign-offs, so I guess that's all.
Yeah, I think this has been a 25-minute sign-off, but it's all right. It's cool.
It's roughly 30, so yeah, brother. All right, man. Well, like I said, it was awesome talking to you, and I will catch you later, man. You have a good one.
Peace. See ya.
Bye.